good, pleasant, desired, but forbidden.
Tell me, why not?
Yo, look at that shine, girl. Pure temptation, every curve on that tree divine. In a vision where you're locked out when the key's in reach. One little taste and your soul will preach. God playing gatekeeper holding you back, while paradise dripping like a diamond track. Don't touch, don't taste that old school rule. But rules break easy when desire feels cool.
Good for the hunger, sweet for the eyes. Fruit of the secret, fruit of the wise. I see it, I crave it, can't hide this fire. Good, pleasant and desired, but prohibited.
Look.
Tracing the Catholic Church's doctrinal evolution requires a precise chronological map, one that begins with the rigid definitions of Vatican I in 1870 and extends to the anticipated papacy of Leo XIV. We can measure this trajectory by analyzing the Church's shifting posture toward three specific variables: divine providence, human freedom, and the reality of suffering. Most historical critiques rely on a methodological flaw. They treat the problem of evil as a single, flattened rhetorical category, rather than a complex set of distinct challenges. To avoid this, we use the granular taxonomy of John S. Feinberg as our methodological control. This framework breaks the monolithic problem of evil into its constituent structural parts. The first division separates the abstract logical problem, the internal consistency of a theological system, from the evidential problem, which questions God's existence based on the data of suffering. Feinberg's second division isolates moral evil and natural evil from specific doctrinal stress points, like the existence of hell or the immediate religious crisis experienced by the sufferer. True doctrinal drift is not measured against a monolithic concept. It is found by mapping how the magisterium navigates these specific, fragmented categories over time. This requires system-sensitive critique. We must evaluate Catholic theology based on its own accounts of omnipotence and freedom, rather than applying imported philosophical definitions. As a modified rationalist system, the Catholic framework balances divine providence and human free will. Anchored in 1870, Vatican I's decrees form our Parmenidean baseline, a fixed reference point. We then track the Heraclitean drift, the measurable deviation as the Church navigates historical pressures. By holding the magisterium to its own structural definitions, we can trace the development of its dogmas as they navigate 150 years of historical pressure. Our analysis begins in the late 19th century, under the pontificates of Pius IX and Leo XIII. At this starting point, the magisterium focused primarily on the logical problem of moral evil. The system maintained internal consistency by rooting moral evil in human agency, identifying the misuse of free will as the origin of sin and suffering. This era prioritized the absolute necessity of retributive justice. The doctrine of hell was a central stress point, framed as the just and eternal punishment required by a perfect moral order. Documents like the Syllabus of Errors established uncompromising boundaries, defining the Church's stance against the perceived theological erosions of the modern age. The 1870 baseline established a rigid metaphysical framework. It prioritized internal logical consistency and dogmatic boundaries over the immediate address of human trauma. This theoretical stability faced a severe macro-historical shock in the early 20th century, as mass society and industrial warfare reached a global scale. These events moved the debate beyond the theoretical possibility of evil. The evidential problem of evil became the new dominant stress point, as the sheer weight of global suffering challenged existing theological explanations. The Church had to account for the unprecedented quantity and intensity of trauma that followed the collapse of the old continental order. Under Pius XII, the Magisterium faced the burden of responding to horrendous moral and natural evil on a scale that strained its traditional defenses. This evidential shock accelerated the development of a more robust diplomatic architecture and a systematized Catholic social doctrine. The mid-century crisis demonstrated that a logically consistent theology must eventually answer the evidential weight of systemic global ruin. The election of Pope John XXIII marked a monumental shift toward a more pastoral self-description. The Second Vatican Council reallocated institutional weight toward Feinberg's religious problem of evil, the personal and existential experience of suffering. The council sessions acted as the mechanism for this reallocation, bringing the global episcopate together to reconsider the Church's role in the modern world. The council reclassified suffering as an urgent crisis of human dignity, shifting institutional weight away from debates over divine foreknowledge and toward immediate pastoral care. This era introduced new pastoral registers, focusing on religious liberty, ecumenism, and the proactive pursuit of social justice. Pope Paul VI institutionalized these shifts, embedding a new pastoral grammar into the Church's modern governing structure. This period forces a historical question. Did this pastoral re-ranking alter the 1870 dogmatic baseline, or merely develop a new vocabulary to address the experience of evil? Under John Paul II and his successors, the Church has navigated a contemporary field marked by intense anthropological and ecological stress. Modern concerns regarding ecology and creation care have brought the problem of natural evil back to the center of theological discussion. Pope Francis has recontextualized natural evil, moving it from an abstract philosophical category to an immediate moral responsibility for the common home. Simultaneously, modern moral sensibilities have placed the traditional doctrine of hell under profound strain. We see an increasing tension between the original Vatican I focus on retributive justice and a modern anthropological framework that questions the logic of eternal punishment. This era tests the absolute limits of the modified rationalist system, questioning if it can absorb modern moral shifts without fracturing its foundational dogmas. When we map the pontificates from Pius IX to our projections for Leo XIV, we see a clear visual record of the Church's shifting priorities. The primary empirical finding is that the Catholic Church did not formally abandon its baseline logical defenses of providence. We define doctrinal drift here as a transition in the locus of magisterial attention, shifting from the logical and eschatological concerns of 1870 toward the evidential and pastoral crises of the 20th and 21st centuries. Answering a different face of evil leaves the foundational logic intact, even as the public rhetoric undergoes a drastic transformation. Doctrinal drift is rarely a formal alteration of dogma. It's a strategic reallocation of institutional weight, intended to survive pressures of a specific historical era. Evaluating institutional theology over the long term requires us to reject monolithic historical judgments. It is impossible to accurately analyze a shift in pastoral care without first defining the underlying mechanics of that system's view of providence. Applying these rules of system-sensitive critique provides a specific context for classifying the upcoming pontificate of Leo XIV within the theological system he inherits. Theology functions as a complex, multivariable system. Tracing its history requires measuring its distinct faces, rather than chasing its rhetorical shadows.
Look, I ain't blind, I can feel that glow. Every shade in the skin like a rainbow flows. It is deadly. Why it look like life said it's wrong? Why it feels so right? Hungry mind, heart in heat. I hear truth in the lies that the serpent speaks. One bite, one step in the twilight zone. Break chains on my will, make this choice my own.
Good for the hunger,
Good, it's all for you.
sweet for the eyes,
Taste that view.
desired by the soul, and the soul can't quit. Good, pleasant, and desire, but prohibited.
Upgrade your mind, override the law. You're a goddess in the making, ain't no flaw. Rewrite the code, girl, Genesis patch. Version up, let's strike that match.
Good for the hunger, sweet for the eyes. Desired by the soul, paradise on fire.
Now you know what they didn't want you to.
Good, pleasant desire.